So Andy is the head of business development and training for CSSCS, which is Corporation for Social Security Claiming Strategies, right? He's trained for ages. Andy, how long have you been training people? I mean, some of the best advisors in the industry. For how long?
On this particular topic, over 12 years.
So over 12 years, Andy's been training some of the top advisors in the country on Social Security claiming strategies. And, some of the top advisors that have come out of that program are with us today. That's Mike Hayflick and Russ Kaiser. So actually, we were first introduced to Mike Hayflick from Andy because he was just telling us all about Mike's successes with the program. Not only was Mike a successful agent, but also super nice guy. Then Russ developed a relationship with partnership with Russ, and that's where we're at today. But then also simultaneously, Mike and Russ have become authors. They've literally written the book on retirement income, and it's called Beyond Break Even. And we just want to let you guys know that if you could, in the chat, please share with us your address information if we don't have it, if you know that we don't have it, because we'd like to put you in the raffle for getting one of those books. So 20 people on this call today are going to get one of Mike and Russ's books. #1 national bestseller on Amazon. Great book. I was just finishing it up last night. But so I want to get into it today. We got a lot to cover, and really happy everybody could be here. Before I hand it off, let me see to Russ, Mike, and Andy. Erick, I was just wondering if you might want to add a few words.
Absolutely, Glenn. Thank you. And good morning or afternoon, depending on where in the country you are. My name is Erick Lindewall. I'm the Vice President of Annuity Sales here at DMI. And I just want to share a few words about the importance of today's topic and how I think it could truly revolutionize each and every one of your practices. So I speak to advisors and agents every day all around the country. And one question that I hear all the time is, for the folks that are really differentiating themselves in the industry, what is it that they're doing that's different? In other words, hey, the most successful people you work with, Erick, what are they doing to achieve the success that they achieve? And, there's a lot of answers to that question, but most importantly, I think folks that are really having success are positioning themselves as specialists, experts in a particular space. Retirement income planning is front of mind for virtually every pre-retiree and early stage retiree in America today. And I'm a believer that nobody has ever solved a problem that they didn't know existed. And so what we're going to talk about today is a way to very clinically, scientifically walk a client down a road where they recognize a potential problem in their retirement income plan, and then hopefully show them a way, typically with one small planning change and one small allocation change, how they can take what is a pretty severe problem in retirement and make it go away. So it's this incredibly scientific, interactive, visual process that helps people acknowledge a problem that exists and make them very motivated to solve it. Andy Robertson has created some revolutionary processes and software that make this job really easy for agents and advisors. And Mike and Russ are, quite frankly, super users. As Glenn mentioned, they literally wrote the book on Social Security optimization. So we're excited about partnering with the folks here on the call. And without further ado, let me turn it over to Andy. Andy, take it away. As soon as you take yourself off mute. There you go.
Thanks, Erick. Thanks, everyone, for being on. I'm excited to talk to you today about a topic I call Social Security optimization. Just let me share my screen with you all real quick, and we will get this thing off and running. Of course, I'm bouncing back and forth between Zoom and Teams these days, and now I always get confused about what's what. Senior moment here. Bear with me. All right, so There, here we go. All right, so hopefully you can all see my screen. I just have to move this toolbar. It'll be an easier way to do all this. All right, so Social Security optimization is really the focal point of my commentary today. And I'll say this, I think Eric did a great job setting this up. The whole idea that, you know, to solve a problem, you first have to recognize there is a problem is spot on, as we say. And we know that the number one concern people have as it relates to retirement income planning is the fear of running out of money. What most people don't know is the simplest solution, maybe right in front of them. And the reality is they don't know it because they're not working with the right people, they're not leveraging the right tools, and they're going about their approach to this critical decision about when and how to take Social Security benefits with a very emotional approach. So what you'll see today, as Eric said, is a very different approach, what I'd like to refer to as a quantitative approach on how to make the optimal decision as it relates to when and how you should take Social Security benefits. But before I do that, I think it's worth pointing out, and I don't always do this, that the number one concern for retirees is the threat of running out of money. The number one challenge for financial advisors is maintaining good quality activity on a daily basis, right? So those of us that are able to do that and do it well are much more successful than those who aren't. So not only is Social Security one of the most dynamic tools, if not the most dynamic tool in the retirement income planning toolbox for you as a financial professional, but it is also, I would argue, the most dynamic activity generation opportunity that you'll find in the marketplace today. So I've been doing this almost exclusively since roughly 2012, and this creates never-ending quality activity for everybody who embraces the opportunity that Social Security represents in their marketing and in their planning efforts. So I think it's important to point that out. What's in it for your clients, that's great. What's in it for you is you're going to get in front of these clients who don't even know, don't even understand that they have this opportunity. You're going to show them how you can solve their single biggest problem, not by requiring anything of them, but getting the right advice from you. And you're going to fill your calendar with great quality activity because Social Security is the one thing that can fill a room every day of the week and has for us and the people we work with for the last 12 plus years. So in this instance, words have meaning. Social Security optimization. There's been plenty of talk about Social Security. Most of it's Social Security maximization. Social Security maximization effectively looks at Social Security in a vacuum. It does not consider the impact Social Security as a tool, as a planning tool, can have on the overall health of a retirement income plan. So Social Security maximization is really focused on this idea that how old are you now? How long are you going to live? And then based upon these 2 points in time, we can back into when you should file and take Social Security benefits. And then people compare and contrast that with the obvious and simplistic break-even analysis that anybody can do, by the way, right? So no one needs a financial advisor to do a break-even analysis for them. And if you're engaging people and talking with them about Social Security, and the extent of which you talk to them about Social Security is limited to break-even, you're not bringing any value to them. Anybody can do break-even on the back of a napkin. However, break-even makes no consideration for the things we're going to talk about today and how these things profoundly impact the outcome of a retirement income plan and the corresponding retirement experience for your prospects and clients. So with that said, let's get into the formal presentation. But as you know, this is no surprise to you. This statistic tells us that the vast majority of Americans are underfunded. We know that. I'm not here to tell you something you don't know. What I am here to tell you is that virtually every academic study ever published that says Americans are crummy savers, right? And the reason that we're going to fail in retirement income planning today is not because we eliminated defined benefit plans and introduced defined contribution plans. No, that's not the issue. The issue is Americans are crummy savers. What I'm here to tell you is that's not the case in many instances. The issue is that academics make no consideration for the fact that Social Security benefits could be taken at other times than early. So every study assumes everyone's going to take benefits early because that's by and large what they do. And they do that because they don't get any advice and they make an emotional decision. like I said earlier, but the academics don't go any further and say, well, what if they took benefits at a different time? Could that have an outcome, or could that have an impact? And I'm glad they don't, because that creates the opportunity for us to step into that breach and show them, once again, that Social Security may be the most dynamic retirement income planning tool that's right under their nose, and they simply don't know it. That whether or not you end up on the right side or the wrong side of this equation, underfunded or fully funded or overfunded, is really about whether or not you're leveraging all the tools properly, not about, in many instances, whether or not you saved enough money. Now, most people take benefits early. As I said in my opening, they do that not because they've done some deep level quantitative analysis, but because they're emotional about it. And the primary driver is fear. Fear of making, of course, fear of making the wrong bet. What do I mean? Most people understand that if I take Social Security benefits early, I'm going to see some kind of permanent reduction in my benefit amount. And they understand if they wait, they're going to get more. Hence this kind of focus on break even. What they're most worried about is this idea that if I opt not to take benefits early and I wait to get more, what if something happens? The worst thing that could happen, and this is what they live in fear of, is they opt not to take benefits at 62. They decide they're going to wait till 70. And on their 364th day of their 69th year, I kid around and say they slip and fall off a 1,000-foot cliff. And all they can think about on the way down to the inevitable ending is, oh shit, I should have taken Social Security at 62. And that's a realistic assessment of how people go through the process of deciding when they're going to take Social Security. That, if we were in a live setting, would elicit some kind of laughter, because the reality is it's true, right? We all know that that's what people live in fear of. So instead, they take benefits early. Many, before they get educated, their plan is to take benefits early, and now they're going to embark on what I'll call a hedging strategy, right? So they're going to game the system. Instead, they're going to take benefits early at 62. They're going to save every check, and they're going to be able to save every check because their intent is to keep working. And they're going to build a secondary retirement account so that if they're still here at 70, they have that extra money they've put aside by saving all those Social Security checks beginning at 62 to match the increase they would have gotten had they simply taken Social Security benefits early. And if, God forbid, they slip and fall off that cliff, they die in peace knowing they didn't leave anything on the table. That's where most people, before, again, they get educated, are leaning when it comes to Social Security. Now, the reality is that sounds good in theory, but there's a whole host of challenges that they're going to come up against if you want to execute that strategy. And the first one is something called, if I can get this thing to move a little fast, the earnings. I'm going to bounce ahead here, given the group we have, the earnings test, right? So if my goal is to take benefits early and keep working, when I say early, prior to full retirement age, and keep working, and I'm going to have earned income, whether I'm self-employed, like a lot of you probably are on this call, or I'm a W-2 employee, I'm going to keep working. If I have earned income or net profit, I'm going to be subjected to what's known as the earnings test. So in 2025, if I take benefits prior to 62 and I earn more than $23,400, for every $2 I'm over, I have to forfeit $1 in benefits. And I use the term forfeit for a reason. Social Security talks about withholding benefits. Well, when you use the term withhold, in my estimation, that implies that somehow, some way, you're going to get that money back. That money is going to get released from the withholding that's taking place. That's not the case. So it is actually a forfeiture. That's what you're up against. So here's a quick example of the first hurdle you'd run up against if your plan was to take benefits early and keep working. Let's say in my example, you had somebody who earned $71,400. The earnings test, again, is 23.4 for 2025. That puts them over the threshold by $48,000. We know that for every $2 they're over, they have to forfeit $1 in benefits. They're going to forfeit $24,000 a year. And that 2-to-1 ratio is going to be in place for every year between 62 and 66 if you have an FRA of 67. So simple, quick math, there's $96,000 potentially you would forfeit, you never get your hands on. It's going to be pretty difficult to execute this hedging strategy if you don't get your hands on some of this money, right? Now, the other thing that's important to note is when it comes to the value or the amount of your earnings that are counted, they look at your gross earnings for a W-2 employee, right? So I'll meet people who say, I'm not worried about the earnings test because I'm socking away a whole bunch of money. I'm using the catch-up provisions. I put my kids through college. Now I'm just focused on saving money. They don't care, right? The IRS and the Social Security Administration do not care about that. They only look at your gross earnings. If you're over the 23.4 threshold for $2 you're over, you're going to forfeit $1 in benefit. So it's going to be pretty difficult, as I said, to execute that strategy as a result. Now I'm going to go back for a minute and talk about something else that a lot of people are unaware of. So many don't understand that the earnings test, that's the first hurdle you're up against. The other thing they're not clear on is what is the difference between what I can collect as early as possible, 62, and what I can collect at 70. So here's a simple but effective table for you. If you have what's known as a primary insurance amount, which is your retirement income benefit at full retirement age, that's your age. Full retirement age in this example would be 67. Your primary insurance amount is the assumed amount you're going to collect at that age. So I'm going to use 1,000 to make math easy. If your PIA is $1,000 and you take early and you have an FRA of 67, the reduction is 30%. That's a permanent reduction. So you're getting 700. If you delay, you get 8% simple interest calculation for each year you delay. If you delay all the way till 70, you get 24% more at 70 than you would have gotten at 67. What a lot of people aren't clear on is the difference between what they collect at 62 and 70 under current Social Security formulas. And that's important because if my goal is to take benefits early and save all that money and build a secondary retirement account, well, let's be clear on, what is it you're going to have to accumulate in total capital to match this increase? Because what people aren't capable of doing in a break-even analysis is really backing into the economic value that Social Security can truly provide to an overall plan. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at a case study. Let's say we have two spouses and their primary insurance amounts are $3,200 and $2,800. So together they're going to have $6,000, but they're thinking like most, they want to take benefits early, 62, for a whole host of reasons. So they're not going to get $6,000. They're going to get 70% of that of $4,200. Their goal is to save. They don't know about the earnings test. And let's pretend for a second the earnings test doesn't exist. Let's pretend you could save $4,200 a month. You get all those checks. You saved every check for the next 96 months. The question I want to answer is how much capital will I need to accumulate to match the increase I would have gotten had I simply waited? So to be clear, in real dollars, 77% more takes you from 4,200 to 7,440, right? So that's an additional 3,240 at 70. So at the end of the day, if I take benefits at 62 and I save the 4,200 a month like clockwork at 70, if I use a hedging strategy, my goal is to continue, obviously, to have the 4,200 but no longer save it, and then pull 3,240 a month off this secondary retirement account I built by saving the $4,200 a month beginning at age 62. Again, sounds good in theory. Let's put it to the test. Earnings test aside, what would you have to earn on top of the $4,200 a month you save over those $9,600 or 96 months in order to build a big enough secondary retirement account that you have a reasonable probability of success of matching the 77% increase you would have gotten had you simply waited? And one thing to point out is that 77% increase, that's a minimum increase. Under current Social Security formulas, that's the minimum increase at 70 over 62. It cannot be less, but it could be more. We'll talk about that in a minute. But to be clear, you need a big enough pile of cash, right, after saving $4,200 a month for 96 months to deliver an extra $3,240 a month or $38,880 a year. So the question is, how much capital will I need to have? Well, let's use some kind of credible process to answer that question, right? So these pop-ups are affecting my ability to control the slides, just so you know. So I use the 4% safe withdrawal rate research that's in abundance in the marketplace that you're all probably familiar with to answer. I call it a credible process to answer the question, how much will I have to accumulate between 62 and 70 to have any reasonable probability of matching the increase I would have gotten had I simply waited? And ultimately, 4%, as you probably know, was first introduced to us by the CFP Bengen in the early 90s. His research indicated we could take 4% per year, increase it every year to combat inflation, and have an 80% probability that 30 years from now would have $1 left, right? And by the way, 30 years from now, you could have $1 left, or you could have 10 times what you started with. But ultimately, either one of those would fall into the win category, meaning the 80% that were successful. So you have an 80% chance you'll have $1 left. But the 4% number, we need to make an adjustment to that, in my opinion, in order for this to be a true representation of what would have to accumulate, because the 4% that Bengen provided was a gross number. It made no assumption for fees, number one, so we need to make an adjustment for that. And number two, it also sought to achieve an 80% probability of success. Now, I'll tell you that we have our own software that we built several years ago. We've had thousands and thousands of plans built in that software. No retail client ever says they want an 80% probability of success. When given the choice between 50 and 99, they almost always pick something north of 90, typically 95 and 99. So I'm going to make an adjustment to 4% in both ways. One for the fact that we want a 99% probability of success, and one for the fact that there's a fee. So if I say I want a 99% probability of success, that 4% falls from 4% gross to 3.62%. Then I'm going to deduct 100 basis points in fees, which I think is a reasonable and defendable assumption around what the all-in cost might be if somebody's working with one of you in a full service relationship. So $38,880 is what we need to match at 70. To get $38,800 into their pocket net, we have to get to that net in your pocket initial safe withdrawal rate. That's 2.62. So how much do we need to accumulate between 62 and 70? Just shy of $1.5 million. Why is that important? Because if you multiply 4,200 by 96, you don't come anywhere near $1.5 million. So how do you get there between 62 and 70? You've got to invest this money, and you've got to invest it successfully enough that you can deliver a compound annual growth rate just shy of 35%. And if you were lucky enough to do that, and that's all you'd be, and we all know it, you would have succeeded in matching what they could have gotten had they simply waited. Now, I'll say this, I don't know what compliance department would ever let you take somebody's retirement savings and between the ages of 62 and 70 invested so aggressively that you had any chance at all of participating in a compound annual growth rate of nearly 35% per year, right? So the controls that would be in place over how you can position those assets given the nature of what they're intended to do and the age of the client are such that you'd never be able to position the portfolio to even have a chance at this. But nevertheless, the point is that's what you'd have to do just to match. Now, the reality is, as I said earlier, that's a minimum increase. And the question that people always have for me is, well, if that's a minimum increase, cannot be less, but it could be more. How could it be more? And it's this simple. Once people reach that first year of entitlement, whether they opt to take Social Security benefits or not, every year the cost of living adjustment is declared. Their primary insurance amount, which is their retirement income benefit, is adjusted to account for that cost of living adjustment on a compounded basis. So what am I saying? I'm saying that between 62 and 70, the only way the increase would be 77%, the cash flow increase from Social Security would be 77%, is if not a single cost of living adjustment was declared during that period of time. Here's all of the cost of living adjustments declared since they became automatic in 1975. And in its entire history of being automatic, there's only been 3 times where the number was 0 and only 1 time where it was in consecutive years. So at the end of the day, the only way, again, it would be just 77% is if not a single COLA was declared during that time. Now, every January I go back and I look at what's happened, right, in the most recent history, and I update what the actual number would have been had you attained age 70 on January 1st, 2025. So you attain age 62, January 1st, 2017, and then you attain age 70, January 1st, 2025. What was the actual increase after we apply the COLAs that were declared on a compounded basis? Was it 77%? No. For this last cycle, it was 133%. So I think we can all agree that if it's virtually improbable that you'd match a 77% increase, I didn't even bother doing the math on what it would take to match 133% increase, because I think we can all agree there's no likelihood at all that you could actually match that. So we use this, and I know Mike and Russ use this every time they do any kind of public event, because what we're trying to convey to the public is you don't know what you don't know, and you're not getting this from a Google search, right? So this is how we solidify our value as human beings in the retirement income planning process at a time when people think I can just turn to a machine for all the answers. It's not the case, especially not with Social Security. And there's all kinds of erroneous information out there. So what I've said consistently over the years is embrace the complexity. Don't be afraid to embrace the complexity of Social Security. It's a true differentiator for you, and it truly solidifies your role in the retirement income planning and the financial planning process. All right, now I know I'm long on time here, Maureen, and you just popped on. So are you going to cut me off, or do you want me to keep going?
I have a quick question, Andy.
Yeah.
So does the COLA also get added into the FRA up to 70?
Into the PIA, you mean?
Just reading the question.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the PIA, the primary insurance amount, it'll all automatically be included into the PIA calculation, right? For life. As long as you have earned income, your PIA calculation will be recalculated. That's the technical answer. And then your DRCs are added on top of that, right? But I think maybe what they're asking is, once I take benefits, what happens? The COLA is applied to the then current value. So whatever it is you're collecting, right, the COLA is applied to that value, right? But the critical takeaway is a lot of people are unaware that even though you're not collecting at 62, you are still getting the benefit of COLA. So you may be working, not collecting, your PIA is continuing to grow, but your COLA is still being applied to that PIA calculation. There's a lot more to it, but at the end of the day, bend points are frozen at age 62, and the impact is only driven by COLAs, not to the bend point, but directly to your PIA calculation, and that'll go on forever. So the weighting means not only does it benefit you, but it's going to benefit the surviving spouse as well, right? If you've waited to take the higher of the two benefits, and it's going to continue to earn whatever the percentage increase is on that higher benefit for the duration of two lives. Okay.
And what if they postpone receiving to 70?
Yeah, that's what I thought I just answered that question.
Okay.
So it's going to happen no matter what. No matter when they take, the COLA is going to be applied directly to, if they're still working, it'll be applied to their COLA, and their PIA and their benefit will be recalculated every year. If they're collecting and they're not working, so they're not changing their 35 years worth of earnings history, it's applied just directly to last year's monthly benefit value, regardless of when you take.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Hey, housekeeping thing really quick. If everybody could use the Q&A to put in their address for the books, the chat isn't taking the data. So that would be helpful. The Q&A alternatively. Thanks, guys.
All right. So as long as you guys are okay with it, I'm going to speed this up because I'm realizing I'm way behind. And I'm going to just show you a quick case study of how taking benefits at different times can impact the outcome of a plan. So this is a group of financial advisors. I don't have to be so elementary about it. So my case study, I'm saying, let's say we have a couple, both age 67. They're not even thinking about taking early anymore because they understand the challenges of the earnings test. But their goal is to retire at 67, have an income goal of 108,000. They want the plan to last for 30 years. They have a desired probability of success of 99%, and together they have 1.2 million in assets. As a financial advisor, what we're always trying to figure out is, will this plan work, right? And the first thing we want to look at is, if they take benefits at 67, what am I responsible for delivering out of the capital that I'm going to manage? So if they take benefits at 67 using those same PIA assumptions, then together they'll have 6,000 a month or 72,000 a year. Right. So we're going to say, all right, well, what are we going to have to deliver from the assets if Social Security delivers 72? And then we'll look at what if they wait. If they wait, they're going to get 24% more minimum, right? Could be more if this COLA is declared. What impact does that have on the capital requirement? So it all comes down to, how much capital do we need to close the gap? So if they take benefits at 67 and retire at 67, I'll call that the earlies, the gap net of Social Security is 36,000. If they wait till 70, the gap before any inflation adjustment is 18,720. But I'm going to inflation adjust that number because we're going to assume no matter what, this couple is going to retire at 67. The analysis we would do in the software, this is just a representation of, is $1.2 million enough for them to meet their objectives, 108,000 over 30 years at a 99% probability of success. But we're going to assume they retire at 67 no matter what. The only difference between the earlies and the laters is when they take benefits. 67 for the earlies, 70 for the laters, but we'll need to make an inflation adjustment for the laters if they're going to take at 70. Either way, if they take at 67, or what I'm calling early, the gap, as I just established, is 36,000. The sustainable initial safe withdrawal rate is not 2.62. In this instance, it's 2.4, because now we're talking about 67 is the year the plan begins, not 70 like I talked about earlier. So to determine whether or not 1.2 million is enough, our software simply says $36,000 is 2.4% of what number? We're just backing into the capital requirement, again, using a good, credible scientific approach. We arrive at these initial safe withdrawal rates by taking the income, the time horizon, the desired probability of success, an assumed fee, right, an assumed inflation rate, and then based upon that information, we can back into the amount of capital somebody needs by using this assumed initial safe withdrawal rate. Now, if they wait and they wait till 70, two things are going to happen. The gap is going to be smaller because Social Security is going to provide more income at 70 than they did at 67 if you wait, thanks to DRCs. And even after we inflation adjust that number by 3.1%, the gap is still 20,515. And the initial safe withdrawal rate is higher because we're 3 years into the plan. They're now 70. Capital requirement is 783.15. At the end of the day, we've added a dimension if they wait till 70. They're still retired at 67. How do they get to 70 if they don't have any Social Security? We're going to assume worst case scenario. They're going to fully fund every one of those 3 years at 108,000, inflated at 3.1%. And we call this period of time between when they retire and when they take benefits the bridge period. And the amount of supplemental kind of income they'll need from their assets we call bridge capital. In this case, it's 334,148 on an inflation adjusted basis. Add that to what we know we'll need to close the income gap at 70 when Social Security begins, and they need $1.1 million. So to be clear, just simply by taking benefits at a different time, we took the capital requirement from $1.5 million to $1.1 million. They have $1.2 million. So they went from underfunded by $300,000 to slightly overfunded. That's almost a $400,000 swing in their favor. And we did it not by picking the right stocks or the right bonds or getting lucky with the sequence of returns. We did it because we didn't just ignore Social Security and assume they should take early, right? We looked at whether or not taking benefits later would solve the problem of not having enough capital and minimize the likelihood they would wake up penniless in retirement. Now, in addition, not only have we delivered the plan on what I call on budget, right, or under budget, meaning it fits within the dollar amount they have, 1.2 million, but we're also delivering by the time they're 70, we're projecting that the inflation adjusted income need will be 118,358, regardless of when they take benefits, because they're both retired at 67. And we're projecting that Social Security is going to provide 24% more thanks to DRCs. And the taxable income is going to be 36% less. So I'm not going to go through all this math today because we just don't have enough time. But suffice to say that Social Security is one of the most tax efficient forms of income that people have. They're completely unaware because they're not familiar with provisional income, which is what Social Security falls under, until they begin collecting Social Security. And there's a lot of false or misinformation about how benefits are taxed. So most people believe if I have more than $44,000 of Social Security income, 85% of it's going to be taxed. Well, clearly that's not the case. The laters we're projecting have just shy of $98,000 of Social Security income at 70, and we're showing just shy of $28,000 would be taxable, not even close to 85%. And then if we add the $20,515 in fully tax invested IRA distribution to the taxable Social Security, we have $48,000 of taxable income on $108,000 of total income. That's before standard deductions. So standard deductions and for 2025 for a married couple filing jointly will take $33,200 off the top of this. So this couple would have $15,000 on $118,000 of taxable income. You can apply, let's call it a 10% of marginal tax rate or effective tax rate. They owe $125 in federal income tax on almost $9,000 a month or $10,000 a month in income. And how do we deliver that? By the way, on budget, simply by taking benefits later. So not only does Social Security reduce the amount of capital we need, but it also delivers the income on a much more tax-favorable basis. Again, something you cannot account for in something like a break-even analysis. So let me just kind of close this out real quick. This section, I already talked about all these slides. We talked about the standard deduction. Let me take you to where the partnership with DMI really comes into play. So if you think about it, whether we talked about the earlies or the laters, the assumption was if there was any income gap once Social Security benefits began, we were going to use an asset allocation approach to deliver the balance of the income need. But that's not the only way to deliver income in retirement. The other option is to purchase a guaranteed lifetime income benefit rider on one of the FIAs that DMI is a great proponent of. And if you position an annuity that'll provide that income at 70, that additional $20,515, the premium at the time we delivered this, or I built this presentation, was $283,945. So remember, it made sense to wait, and we needed $783 for the laters to deliver the additional $20,515 using an asset allocation approach. We only need $284,000 using an annuity. Add that to the bridge capital, which doesn't change because it's a function of when they retire, 67, and when they take benefits, 70, which they would do in either scenario. Add the bridge capital to the capital required to close the income gap, and the total capital requirement now falls from $1.1 million to $618,000. So to be clear, what did we just see happen? They went from using what I'll call the traditional approach, which is to take early and throw all the money in the market and roll the dice, to the optimized strategy, which requires not 1.5 million, but 618,000, which took them from underfunded initially using the traditional approach, underfunded by 300,000, to overfunded by 582,000. That's an call it $82,000 swing in the client's favor. Obviously, that's a game changer for them. It's a game changer for you if you're trying to differentiate yourself from the competition, and it creates all kinds of planning opportunities for you to bring to the table with them once the income is accounted for, right? So the income plan we're talking about on the optimized approach would be much more effective than the plan they were thinking about. I'll close it out by saying, if we have 4 areas that we focus on, if we use the earliest plan, or what I call the traditional approach, 67% of their income, $108,000 is guaranteed. That's the portion attributable to Social Security. 67% is inflation adjusted. The amount that's considered taxable, 61%, and the guaranteed survivor benefit, assuming no COLAs, is 38.4. How about for the optimized? 100% of the income is guaranteed. We position an annuity that's performance-based, so at least 67% of the income is automatically inflation adjusted, if not more, and in many cases, considerably more. The amount taxable is considerably less. We saw that. And the survivor income is almost $30,000 more per year. Think about what you'd have to have in capital remaining upon the death of the first spouse to match the $30,000 of additional guaranteed survivor income you're getting from Social Security under the optimized plan. This is the difference between Social Security maximization and Social Security optimization. And it all starts by understanding that whether or not people end up on the left side or the right side of this equation, either fully funded or underfunded, in my experience, has far less to do with how much they've saved and far more to do with who they work with. If they're working with retirement income specialists like myself and Mike and Russ, then the issues that they normally face are eradicated by our approach and our commitment to leveraging all the tools in the retirement income planning toolbox. I have a software platform we'll talk about another time that puts all of this into a simple and effective approach and lets you show people in real time how you can affect their outcome. And ultimately, it begins by understanding the content and understanding Social Security in such a way that you can talk to people about Social Security day one in an effective and productive way. So I'll stop there. I know I've taken up way too much time. And I think it was probably 30 minutes by the time we get started. I'll kick it back to you guys.
Nice job, Andy. Really appreciate it. Yeah, the systems and the strategies here are really powerful. And be sure when you get the book, Beyond Break Even, to take a look at some of the case studies in there. So we're talking hypotheticals here with some of these numbers, but this all plays out in reality in a powerful way. And so some of the case studies in this book are great. And so if this is capturing your attention, we do have a CSSCS training on May 20th and the 22nd. On the 22nd, we're covering the RAO. So if you're already certified and you want to get, you just want to brush up on your RAO skills, you can come to that 20-second webinar presentation. But so for those of you that are getting geared up, and thinking this is going to change the way you do business, that 20th CSSCS certification is there for you. So we want to get you, or I guess actually Eric could help you to get signed on to that program. But I was kind of curious if Russ and Mike could perhaps speak to that opportunity, what the CSSCS training means to you guys. What did it mean to, the evolution of your career after taking that?
Yeah, first I'd say what an education that Russ and I just got from Andy Robertson, right? A review of the many things and the hundreds of times we've said these things, but I always learn something new from Andy. And I want to also mention Andy wrote the foreword of Beyond Break Even. So we're super grateful and privileged to have him introduce us in this space. And it's just about 10 years. I'm in a 10th year doing what I do, about a third year now with Russ. I would say, and I think the education that I just mentioned that Andy provided, it's super disarming when you're with people, either in your own office or in a workshop, talking about something they have really very little knowledge of. And it has nothing to do with the markets. It has nothing to do with, them saving enough or doing whatever with their own finances. It just simply has to do with educating them on a topic that they need help with. So I think that's really a nice way to become warmer to people that you meet versus saying, hey, let us tell you how we manage money. And of course, talking about that A-word product that we are tempted to lead with, it's far easier to say, this is an educational workshop. We're going to talk about Social Security and how to make the best of it for you and your spouse and maybe your family. So we think it's been a game changer. Clearly, we have been, like, and I mean this with all the humility I can muster, we have been extremely successful doing this. And it's not just about the monetary success, it's about the success of helping hundreds and hundreds of people. And it feels amazing to do that. I don't know how all you feel, but when you're helping your spouse or your children or your friends, your family, it's pretty rewarding in and of itself. This is what this process is. It's helping people achieve the outcomes that we know can be far better than if they just sort of wing it, or they do what the neighbor told them to do, or even more dangerously, they do what the Social Security agent tells them to do, because they're not supposed to give advice. They're told in their PALMS manual, do not attempt to persuade claimants. So we are needed. And as Andy says it, and we say it all the time, embrace the complexity of this, differentiate yourself, do something different than the advisors that these people are already working with, and make a difference in these people's lives.
Yeah, and the training is one thing. It's really important to get certified to differentiate yourself as a specialist, but you really have to embrace it and get into it to be able to speak to it like as well as Andy does. Like it just rolls off his tongue. But when you can do that and you can talk with such passion about it and show how that part of the retirement income plan, is so well thought out, then it allows you to then build trust, but then pivot to other strategies, right? Because then people are always concerned about taxes and Roth conversions, right? That's a big concept for people. It's how do we then manage the investment strategy? Well, now we have the income solved, so now we're solving for growth perhaps, or then legacy, right? And so it helps you to bring them in, that they know they have a solid income plan, they know you're the subject matter expert in that space, and then you can more effectively manage the rest of their plan in a way that is profound to them. And with the software, you can easily stack what they thought they might have done. If they talk to their buddy at work, everyone likes to get advice from their uncle who, knows everything, or at the water cooler at work. So what they might have thought when they'd claim versus an alternative versus an optimized plan. And I'm a certified financial planner as well, and I'm always about alternatives, like what could you do? And some of these plans, like Andy said, it's a lack of a strategy, not necessarily assets, but they only have one shot at meeting their goals and objectives, maybe through annuities. But to the people that aren't sold on annuities, there's a lot of marketing that's bad out there, not true, but bad out there about them. It shows you it shows you the truth about the annuities, and it shows you, perhaps in an alternative situation, they do have enough wealth, but it's not the best use or most efficient use of their wealth. And then the software jumps into like the real, I call myself a nerd in this space, but like the detail people, the engineers, the healthcare professionals, the doctors, the people that pay attention to the numbers, they're the best clients for this, because you can drill down them and show them, look, we're deploying your capital into this annuity, which guarantees pretty much, that there's no downside. You're not going to go to zero. You have a 99% chance. And what do you give up for that? Well, maybe 10xing the portfolio over your lifetime. But what would you rather have, right? Do you want that peace to be able to sleep at night and live peacefully and comfortably through retirement? Or would you rather die with 10 times more wealth than you have now? So that's what I would say. Become a specialist and really, really buy into what you're doing.
Well, and to your point, Russ, I don't think that it's the certification isn't the hardest thing to get. I passed the test myself, right? So yeah, it comes to me. But I'm a VP of marketing. So I would say, don't be afraid to jump in feet first. But then even further, we have the support of Andy Robertson. We're talking to Russ and Mike about developing a catalyst program together that we'll talk about another time. But the support is there. Erick Lindewall is here as well. So, Eric, I don't know. I think you're probably chomping at the bit to ask a question.
Well, you know me well, Glenn. You know me well. So, first, some comments. There's some thematic points that always come through every time we talk with Russ and Mike, and that's consistency. You guys focus on this virtually exclusively. Am I incorrect in saying that?
No, not at all. No, we do. We can help everyone, but we think we help the people approaching or just at that precipice of working years to retirement. Right at that moment, we help those people, I think, in the most significant way.
Right. So, I mean, everybody here on the call today, you think about where the sweet spot is. If you could draw, or if you could identify one demographic that you really want to work with more than any other demographic, who would it be? And it's typically those pre-retirees. They're people that are in the glide path. They're not on the runway of retirement yet, but boy, the landing gear's out, the flaps are deployed, and they're trying to figure out how to land that thing as safely as they can. And these are the people that are going to naturally benefit from and be interested in going through this process, right? And so Glenn said it perfectly. Get certified. The certification not only gives you the knowledge, but the tool to be able to really deliver effective plans to folks. And I want to ask Mike and Russ, I want to ask you a question because I've seen the reports, okay? And they all look a little different, but really there's three strategies, typically what I refer to as the money page, right? You've got the current plan. That's sort of the, hey, if you do what you're thinking of doing, this is what your life looks like. Typically, that's not a great number, right? Oftentimes you see someone who comes into the meeting feeling pretty good. Yeah, I got $1.5 million and doing pretty well. And then all of a sudden, this thing tells them they're underfunded. You get some reactions, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's shock.
Yeah. And then the report goes to an alternative plan, which is typically just delaying Social Security till age 70. And that improves that number a bit, right? But oftentimes, isn't it still not a pretty picture?
Yeah, I think, and I think it's interesting when you're meeting with people that have had other type of guidance or no guidance, because when they think they're going to delay Social Security and use their own wealth,
right,
like sooner than later, it's like, wait. I accumulated over these 3-4 decades. You're telling me I've got to immediately go to that nest egg?
Right.
They've likely either been conditioned to think that, or advisors have said, no, don't touch that money in the AUM type accounts.
That's right.
We want you to go claim Social Security because you want to. And who knows how long the trust fund's going to be intact. And who
Right.
knows how long you're going to live, right? They go along to get along instead of providing, in our opinion, fiduciary type information to them.
Yeah.
Right. So we get to the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Russ.
I was just going to say, and I said this at the workshop we taught last night. Some people, because you said, $1.5 million in the scenario you gave, but sometimes or I shouldn't say sometimes, it always depends on how much money they really want to spend or need to spend in retirement and really what their goals and objectives are. So, a lot of times people won't know at all. They just go, I have $1.5 million. I think I'm pretty good until they understand truly what they spend and what they need to live, at least the bare minimum, how they want to live. But sometimes we build some discretionary spending into that. So $1.5 million could be plenty, maybe, but maybe they're way underfunded because of the lifestyle that they actually want. So you have to, the opportunity to help get that information out of them is really important too, which many people are lax on.
Yeah, and then there's that final box. So we talked about how your current scenario. Here's what it looks like if you do what you're thinking of doing, and then here's the alternative scenario where we make a little change in when you file. And we talked about how those clients have that look of shock when they see that underfunding in the current scenario, and oftentimes underfunding or barely funded an alternative. And then there's that column off to the right, which is the optimized scenario. And very, very often that optimized scenario takes them from very underfunded to substantially overfunded. In fact, Andy's example today, that client needed $1.5 million to get done what they wanted to get done using their current plan. And all the way up to the right, the optimized scenario, they only needed $618,000. So talk a little bit about the emotions that you see, the look on people's face when they realize that by going through this process, they could take their life and truly tie the loose ends together and have a successful retirement. Is that the aha moment for clients?
I mean, maybe it's at least the start of them opening their mind to different planning strategies, because like Mike and I, we're fee-based money managers, but we do everything though. So we have everything open to them, not just money management, like a lot of investment advisors do, which they can't even talk about these other strategies or inform them on them. And so I think what it does for the investment-minded people, the ones that do believe in the markets, it's the paradigm shift of, hey, now we're solving for income, right? Not growth. Like we have to deliver the income, and what's the easiest way or the most effective way to do that for you? And then we can actually become, because you like the stock market, now we can take what that excess capital is and we can be super aggressive with that. And we can go 100% stock if you want with that. We can, whatever they want to do.
And I think it also then just adds to, we continue to educate, right? Andy had that really awesome depiction of the funnels, like how much money is required in each funnel in each case. And when you start to show people that, you can explain things like what we call asset segmentation. We're gonna break your wealth into very purposeful objectives. And then we can talk about what's the cost of your retirement, right? We all like to get something at a lower cost, right? If you don't understand that concept, I'll set you up with my wife. She is amazing at finding everything at like dirt cheap prices.
She is.
But if you can lower the cost of your retirement, as we did in that example, then that's a win, because again, you have far more capital to do discretionary, or even, as Andy, I know you use this phrase, resuscitate the idea of legacy. Some people have given up on it. We can resurrect the thought, resuscitate the thought that they can actually leave something to their kids and grandkids. So I think, to answer your question, Eric, it's just further education, how we surgically use an annuity, how we use every dollar we can to create as much of those dollars we can as excess capital versus your income plans.
So to put a kind of a bow on that, because I see Maureen has some questions. Folks, step one, join us on May 20th to go through the certification class and start the process of becoming specialists and experts in this space. Again, I started today by saying nobody ever solved a problem that they don't know exists. And so this process, this software, this approach will allow the problem to be, readily identified to the clients, take ownership of it, and then ultimately they'll be more motivated to solve the problem. And the result will be greater outcomes for clients, strong relationships with you, and just more opportunities. So thank you, guys. As always, I always enjoy when we chat with you. Maureen, I'm judging by the look on your face, there's a bunch of questions.
A lot of them have been answered. So I've been really thrilled with this discussion from Andy, Mike, and Russ, and of course you, Eric and Glenn. But one question that I know Mike and Russ are going to want to answer, because I love their answer, is how do you handle the situation with Social Security running out of money in, 10 years?
Why don't I tackle that first, and then I'll let you guys,
There you go.
then Mike and Russ chime in.
Absolutely.
You guys probably say the same thing, but the way I've always addressed that is very simple. Two things I say to people. I'm happy to have that discussion with you if you'd like, but I want to ask you a question. If you want us to build a retirement income plan for you, assuming Social Security won't be there, how long is this conversation really going to last? Because we're not talking about a retirement income plan, right? We're probably talking more about like a retirement work plan, right? And so that's the first thing, because it's an emotional objection. The other thing I say is, I think the simplest way for you to process what's going on is to use your common sense. This is the primary income source for 76 million boomers. And if the worst thing that people can imagine would ever come true, that they woke up tomorrow morning and Congress had pulled the rug out from under Social Security, which is what they live in fear of, and all that cash flow is gone, what kind of an impact do you think that might have on the economy? The primary income source for 76 million people disappears overnight. We're talking about the epitome of too big to fail, right? This is not a reasonable consideration. So normally you can get beyond, from what I've seen, you can kind of move beyond that emotional stuff when you just kind of lay it out like that. But Mike and Russ, you guys do this every day. I know I shared that with you, Mike, years ago, but you guys probably have more to add to that.
I usually will say a couple of different things. And number one, I've read some actuarial studies, and number one, Congress has always historically acted. And of course, far too many people only live on Social Security, like you alluded to, Andy. So I usually will say that, but I explain how it's funded, right? And really 80% of the benefits are funded through FICA taxes. And if you don't know, only up to about 175,000 of your income goes to the Social Security portion of FICA tax. So if you make $1 million a year, a very small amount of your income actually is taxed for FICA. So if they uncapped that, Congress being, if they uncap that, I've seen actuarial studies that add another 60 to 70 years of benefits payable, and they do nothing else. The other thing is, if you really think Social Security is going away, well, like I just said, 80% will still be payable. So would you rather have 80% of a bigger number or a smaller number, when it goes to the claiming decision, if you are in that fear-mongering camp? The other thing I always say, it is backed by the full faith of the U.S. government. And, so is your bank account, your FDIC insurance, and so is your risk-free rate of return, which is a U.S. government, 10-year government treasury. So if you're worried about the government not backing its obligations, you should be worried way more about all the other financial instruments you use as well that are considered risk-free. That's just the way I like to frame it for people. But again, Congress has always acted, so they'll get their act together at some point, but it'll be a political football probably for another decade.
Guys, this is fantastic. And, I just want to make one last comment. I think that this approach puts you in a position where you become more of an educator, like Mike was pointing out. Mike, I don't know if we talked about this on this call, but Mike used to be a teacher, and I think it's apropos. He gravitated to this. I think he knew he needed to have a more data-based system working for him. I don't want to speak for you, Mike, but does that make sense to where you probably don't feel so much like a salesperson when you're delivering in this way? And I don't know. For me, if I was an advisor, I would probably feel more comfortable with this kind of an approach. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, Glenn. I see that everything that we all do to help these folks that are in front of us or at workshops is just education. It's, as Russ often says, we're putting choices in front of you. We believe that people are smart enough to figure out that like a $618,000 retirement is far better than a $1.5 million retirement that they can't even do. And we think that just giving choices and guiding them to those choices and then implementing them and seeing them through, reviewing with them a couple times a year, it's possible, and it dramatically changes the outcomes that these folks are going to have. So yeah, I think everything we do is about education. I don't think many of us can close business when we're simply telling people what to do. We're showing them the choices, and the software does that in an amazing fashion.
Yeah. Well, you guys are great educators. You did a great job today educating us. Eric, you too. So Andy, Russ, Mike, all of you guys. Eric, did you have any last words? I do have your contact information up on the screen because I want people to reach out to you for the CSSCS class coming up on May 20th. We'll have more throughout the year, but here's an opportunity this month you can get in on. Did you want to add to that, Eric?
Yeah, just for folks that have your phone handy, scan that QR code. You'll get all my contact information. Glenn mentioned there'll be other certification classes. This is the one, folks, right? A million-mile journey starts with one step. And if you want to take your practice to the next level and change the lives of literally hundreds of your clients, it starts with joining us on May 20th. Start the process to implement this dynamic approach into your practice. And we're here to help you every step of the way. So it starts with a phone call. Reach out to me, drop me an email, and I would love an opportunity to have a conversation with you and figure out if this type of approach is right for you. So thanks, Glenn.
Hey, thank you guys. And thanks to everybody for attending. And I look forward to the next one. And we'll see you at the CSSCS class on the 20th.
Can't wait.
Thank you all. Have a great day.